Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3 Irony and today we are talking and making some wild guesses and some wild speculations about what we do know and what we can guess about Path of Exile's upcoming expansion and challenge league for patch 3.8. Those of you who are veterans of the channel, you of course know how we do things around here, but if you're new, welcome to the community. You can like, subscribe, and ding the bell to be notified about more videos just like this one when they go live. And of course, there are convenient timestamps placed above my slightly balding forehead if you'd ever like to revisit or jump ahead in our discussion to a particular segment. Those are hot linked for you down below in the video description. And of course, any references or citations that we make during today's discussion will also be hot linked for you down below in our video description. So first off, what do we know about 3.8? Well, we know that 3.8 won't be any of these types of reworks because these types of reworks have already been done in the past relatively recently. First off, a massive melee rework. That was done in 3.7 Legion League. And so we're not going to see a massive melee rework. We might see some quality of life tweaks. We might see some of the development team going back and making some adjustments to the things that came out with Legion in the massive melee rework that came alongside it. But we probably won't see a retweaking and a rebranding of a massive melee rework that was in similar scale to what 3.7 was. Also, we probably won't see a massive self-cast rework since that was 3.6. And realistically, all of the spells that got tweaked in 3.6, those have now been reiterated upon or numerically changed or updated or tweaked each and every league. So expect for some self-cast spells to probably be tweaked, but don't expect every single spell to go back and receive some sort of mechanical change or mechanical nerf or mechanical update. They've already done that. That was 3.6. We probably won't see that again in 3.8. Thirdly, we won't see a massive change to Forsaken Masters. That was 3.5. There's a growing groundswell of community support of people raising their hands and saying, hey, we really don't like the way how masters are, and hey, it's really not realistic to unlock all of the various crafting that needs to be unlocked through Jund and through the various Forsaken Masters missions that are present. The reality is that's probably not going to get relooked at before 4.0. It's just a percentage thing, right? The amount of work that went into 3.5 and to Betrayal and to the Forsaken Masters getting built up realistically for a year with the introduction of Einhar and Jund and Alva and Nico through their respective leagues, Bestiary, Incursion, Delve, etc. Like that whole process and build up to 3.5 was massive. It was a year in the making. They're probably not going to reevaluate that, rework it, or change it in the duration and in the span of a single league that's prior to 4.0. Fourthly, we're not going to see a massive trade overhaul. This was actually explicitly stated in the 3.8 update, not manifesto, but update announcement about the timeline of when 3.8 was coming out. That's been confirmed that it's not happening. So that could mean one of two things. First off, it could mean that we're spouting something that GGG themselves have said, but it could be that they're actually like baiting and switching us. It could be that they're saying, hey, we're definitely not doing a trade overhaul. Wink, wink. And then they actually do a trade overhaul. But I don't think that's actually what's happening. I think on trade, GGG is actually very transparent. They're very staunch, and you might even want to say stubborn if you don't like it, but they are very committed to their trade principles. The trade is staying the way how it is, and I think that if that ever is happening, that there's going to be a trade change, it will come with 4.0. So things that we do know that 3.8 won't be in terms of their league mechanics, we can say for sure that they probably won't be a massive board game type mechanic like Synthesis or Betrayal or Incursion where you're building a temple. We've seen these sorts of massive board game type third party, you need a second screen and you need somebody else to explain it, and you might need to watch, between 6 to a dozen different YouTube videos on the layers of the mechanics that are going on. We're not going to see that happen. Chris and Jonathan have both spoken to this, that they're going to keep leagues in their challenge type and in their gameplay mechanics a lot more simple in between 3.6 building up to 4.0. So we're probably not going to see anything akin to Synthesis, Betrayal, or Incursion. We've already seen it. It's not going to happen in between now and 4.0. We probably won't see a massive endgame type of league, thinking about like Delve, where there's this massive, subset of the game. where really it almost split the community, where there are some members of the community that do not enjoy mapping whatsoever and just wish they could delve full time. And then there are some members of the community that don't enjoy delve, but they see that there's a purpose for it, and so they just map. We're probably not going to see this sort of end game type of gameplay style added on. Would it be cool to see that added on? Sure, but I just don't think that it's realistic to expect that to come in 3.8. We know that 3.8 won't be these types of Ascendancy overhauls because these Ascendancies have simply been reworked and overhauled over the last couple of leagues. So first off, Chieftain and Berserker in the Marauder tree, Gladiator, Slayer, and Champion have all been interacted with in the Duelist tree. The Trickster, although maybe there will be some tweaks to Sabo. Sabo got a little bit of changes recently, but probably Sabo and Assassin could be up for Ascendancy overhauls, but definitely not Trickster. If anything happens to Trickster, he may get nerfed. Occultist and Elementalist have both been tweaked. We just saw basically all of 2000, I think it was 2018 and a little bit prior to that with Arc, Elementalist, and Triple Herald. Elementalist being really, really meta. We saw how strong Occultist was with the flat amount of energy shield that they could stack with all of the various synthesis rares and implicits that came out that could be crafted. So Occultist and Elementalist have both been nerfed and hit. Occultist even lost one of its keynotes recently in 3.7, so I don't think Occultist and Elementalist are going to get hit. In terms of Hierophant and Guardian, both of them have been reworked and messed with for the everyone's favorite pantsless character for the Templar. Okay, so what will most likely 3.8 be like? Those are all the things that it won't be like. What will 3.8 most likely be like? Well, in terms of reworks, 3.8 most likely will focus on something like lab enchants. Lab enchants are something that we've chatted about here on our channel, right here in our community in Good Guy Gaming. It's one of our most popular topics ever, is talking about lab enchants and the possibility of a rework for them. I think personally that this is a big enough thing that GGG is going to push this off for 4.0, and they're probably already working on it for what the lab is going to look like in 4.0. I think the lab itself is going to get relooked at in 4.0, and that lab enchants are going to be a subset of that. However, I could be wrong. It could be that lab enchants themselves just get looked at and formulated into something relatively new, and so it could be that 3.8 interacts with lab enchants. It also could be that 3.8 interacts with two-handers. We've seen a lot of two-hander hate as well as love with the massive melee rework that came about recently. But in terms of spellcasters, maybe there could be some perks for swords, axes, bows, etc. But I think mostly for staff users, for spellcasters, two-handers, most of their power in concept comes from the ability to have essentially a second 6-link. Right? You can essentially have a 6-link in your chess piece, and then if you're using a two-hander, you could have a second 6-link setup. I think the problem with that, and some of the kind of the awkward spot that two-handers are at right now, is that having a second 6-link setup simply isn't needed in Path of Exile at the moment. Like, you need one 6-link setup maybe to clear most of the game, and the reality is depending on your mechanical skill, you can clear most of the game, delve aside, but you can clear most of the game, we're talking endgame bosses included, on 4-link, 5-link, and 6-link. Again, depending on your skill level, but a single 6-link is enough to get you through the entirety of the game. You don't need two 6-links. So two 6-links, it's not just that it's overkill. Oftentimes, it's that it doesn't necessarily add anything to what you're already doing. If you're already blowing up the entire screen or taking down bosses in record time with a single 6-link, then a second 6-link doesn't really increase any of your efficiency most of the time. And sometimes it takes away from your efficiency because by using a two-hander, you're actually sacrificing either a quiver if you're using bows, or if you're using a shield or a second weapon if you're dual wielding. So it just seems a little bit awkward where two-handers are at the moment. So it could be that two-handers are something that 3.8 will look at specifically. Ranged rework. This is also something that could happen in 3.8. I highly doubt this because it would basically mean a nerf to what everyone plays right now. So a ranged rework, when I say a ranged rework in 3.8, what I mostly mean is I mean something that is focused heavily on the way how range itself works, right? Whether that's interacting with how quickly off-screen mobs interact with you, or whether how quickly and how far your actual projectiles can go, whether they can travel for upwards of a screen to 2 screens away. I think a range rework might be coming down the pipeline in terms of nerfing, buffing, changing the way how range and how proximity of your character to monsters and to mobs and to aggro could actually work. And I think 3.8 could actually work on that. I think that could be something that would be mechanically not necessarily the sexiest thing that would come out, but I think that's why it would be a rework. It would be a ranged rework on how monsters interact with you and how you interact with monsters and the range that takes place. I think that's one of the only ways, and I really haven't seen many people chat about it yet, but I think that's one of the only ways that GGG could address range and the speed meta of the game and the power spike that characters have gradually had over the last couple of years in relationship to the difficulty of content that's out. I think a range rework is really the only way that GGG could do that without simply blanket nerfing all of the things that everyone likes to play because it's ranged. So I think that's mechanically something that could be coming down the pipeline. Fourthly, and kind of in line with the range rework, would be a bow rework. This would most likely be focused on the Raider, Deadeye, and Pathfinder ascendancies for the Ranger, simply because we've seen in the past melee rework, we've seen self-casting spell rework, we've seen channeling rework, and so it could simply be that GGG has a checklist of things that they want to get to before 4.0, where they're reworking different weapons and different ways of casting attacks and casting spells. So it could be that bows are next up on the chopping block, as it were, for reworks. In terms of League mechanics, 3.8 most likely will focus on something like endgame bosses. I'm thinking something most likely appearing based on random encounters. Of course, Chris Wilson gave his beautiful topic and beautiful speech at the Game Developers Conference this past year, talking about layers of randomness. And so we're going to see consistency in that regard. Consistent RNG? There's a pun or a joke to be made there somewhere. I'm sure one of you will make it down in the comments. But an endgame boss that's based on random encounters. Something like Abyss, something like Breach, where you've got Breach Lords that occasionally show up inside your Breach. Maybe Bestiary, where you've got a chance for certain beasts to lead you into the boss's lair that could potentially drop something great or could potentially drop something terrible. Or even something like Delve, where you've delved for hundreds and hundreds of levels, but you maybe haven't bumped into an endgame boss yet. So expect endgame bosses to come with some layer of randomness attached. Also expect for the League mechanic in 3.8, immediate rewards. There will be no need for a second screen game going on, or a mini game, or a board game where you're constantly referencing your phone or constantly referencing your second screen, or basically constantly breaking up the flow of your gameplay in Path of Exile to go check something else that you wanted to do in Path of Exile. So think Breach, think Harbinger, think Legion, think Essence. Everything that's going to happen inside 3.8 most likely will be something that you can click on, interact with, run over, and simply go with. Something that doesn't necessarily break up your gameplay flow and that provides immediate rewards. Thirdly, you can probably bet that 3.8 will focus on scaling farming, somehow dependent on item level. So thinking Bestiary, Incursion, Essence, Delve, where, for instance, in Incursion, you build a temple that's based on the item level. This could be that bosses have a greater chance of spawning at certain item levels. It could be that the immediate rewards scale with various item levels. But you can for sure bet that GGG has heard people saying all through Legion League, low-level Legion League, farming of monoliths with glacier farming is the way to go, and it's the way to get everybody started. You can bet that there will be scaling farming rewards for players, both who want to get started with repetitive farming, similar to monolith farming and glaciers, but then also people who want to scale all the way up to late game mapping. There will be scaling farming somehow that will be item level dependent. In terms of Ascendency overhauls, 3.8 most likely will focus something like the Ranger, like Pathfinder, Deadeye, or Raider, which none of them have really been tweaked for quite a while. The Juggernaut hasn't been messed with, and is consistently just good every single league. For 3.8, I'm going to be playing hardcore, so if Juggernaut doesn't get a change, then he's consistent and he's stable. If he does get a change, then hopefully it'll just be a buff for additional nodes that come on down the line to make him even stronger. He hasn't been tweaked as recently as Zerker and Chieftain, so I'm expecting Juggernaut either in 3.8 or 3.9 to get some sort of overhaul or rework. The Inquisitor, it got some holy ground buffs, but really that's about it. It's about 1 to 2 keynodes behind its brothers, the Guardian as well as the Hierophant, just in terms of the number of nodes that are on that Ascendency tree. It seems like GGG is moving towards a new pattern where Every Ascendency has got like roughly somewhere between 12 to 16 different Ascendancy keynotes that you can choose from. So just a plethora of options inside Ascendancies. And it's really interesting because it means, on the one hand, that they're probably not going to come out with other new Ascendancies. At the same time, it could mean that they're essentially reworking some of these Ascendancies and pulling certain attributes and abilities off of them, which could mean that they're actually pulling them from present Ascendancies to actually make new Ascendancies. So you can interpret that however you'd like, if you think more Ascendancies are coming or less Ascendancies are coming. But I think for the purposes of 3.8, we can definitely say that Inquisitor doesn't have as many keynotes as Guardian or as Hierophant, and it hasn't been the center type for any kind of reworks recently. So therefore, I think Inquisitor is probably up on the chopping block. And there might be one more, but I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Okay, so what do we know about the timeline of 3.8? This little snapshot is taken from, of course, the PoE Wikia, and it's really, really helpful to note exactly where and when announcements get made, as well as what the realistic dates are for 3.8. So first off, we know that the 3.8 expansion and Challenge League are scheduled for PC and Xbox One and PS4 release for September 6, 2019. All of those dates for all of those various releases are coalesced into a single date now. So we don't have separate dates for console and PC anymore. At least that's what it looks like. That's the scheduled listing. Of course, that date can change. The end of Legion League is scheduled from September 3rd, 2019. And in the past, the GGG promotion cycle has followed a couple of these patterns. So first off, more loot pinata and less gameplay complex leagues are set to accompany or lead up to major expansions. So right now, we are in a present world where we are leading up to a major expansion with 4.0. There has never been this amount of press, this amount of hype, and this amount of even teases done by GGG looking forward to a massive, massive expansion. And so we are definitely building up towards something that's going to be awesome in 4.0. But that being said, we can expect less complex, more loot pinata based leagues while we build up to that 4.0 cycle. Conversely, that also means that there will be more complex gameplay when we're between major expansions. So for those of you that are more excited for those more complex leagues like Bestiary, Incursion, Delve, Betrayal, and Synthesis, you can probably expect to see those style of leagues return after 4.0 is released. GGG as a creative team is probably sitting on several different ideas that they want to hit and that they want to use as league mechanics, but they're probably shelving them for the moment, benching them for the moment, and saying, let's save these for after 4.0 once we get 4.0 successfully rolled out and all of the fixes in. So what do we know about the timeline continued? Well, we know some of these fun things, and this was great to go back and look at all of the details. So some of this is going to be minutia, but hopefully it builds up to some of the predictions that we're going to make. So this is the equivalent of me showing my work, so that way you know that the predictions I'm about to make are actually somewhat justified. So league announcements sometimes are on Tuesdays. Betrayal happened in November 13 of 2018. That was a Tuesday announced league. It was not a Tuesday release. It was a Tuesday announcement. Synthesis also was a Tuesday announcement. That happened February 19th of 2019. Wednesday, league announcements get made. Abyss League was the last one to do it back in November 22nd of 2017. Thursdays are also a day when leagues get announced. Delve League, August 9th of 2018, which the present timeline and the present schedule were in the same sort of development cycle presently. We're in due for a September or August release date. Again, that September 6th is the release date for 3.8. So this is the same sort of timeline that we are on to compare Delve with our present league launch. So Delve was announced on a Thursday, August 9th of 2018. Fridays are also a day that league announcements get made. Breach in November 18th of 2016 was the last one to be made on a Friday. Typically, league announcements are made 14 to 24 days prior to the league launch. I've got some data to back this up. Breach launched December 2nd of 2016. Abyss launched December 8th of 2017. Delve launched August 31st of 2018. And Betrayal launched December 7th of 2018. So you're looking at a window of roughly 14 to 24 days prior to the league launch. So a countdown can begin from September 6th. If September 6th is the launch date, then we can simply schedule out 24 to 14 days. So, based on GGG's history, GGG always attempts to set expectations low. This is one of the reasons why they are so tight-lipped about announcements and about expansions and about challenge leagues. They set their expectations low and then hope to exceed those expectations with announcements with very, very little information being given out prior to those announcements. That's why those are called teases. And the community management team does a great job teasing us as a community with various little snippets of information prior to official announcements. Secondly, based on GGG's history, speculation around changing difficulties back prior to 3.0 were basically, maybe we're going to lose one difficulty and we'll gain one act. Maybe that's what we'll get. Those were predictions and speculation that was made in 2016 and 2017. And then GGG just came out and blew away all of us with Fall of Oriath. They deleted all of the difficulties and they added 6 new acts. There was nobody that had that inside information that was talking about it. It wasn't leaked. It was kept a great secret. And when GGG slammed the paper down with the Fall of Oriath announcement and just said, hey, by the way, we're doing away with all difficulties, and here comes 6 new acts. I still remember where I was. I was in a hotel room watching the trailer, and I still remember that exact moment, and what I felt like, and just the immediate rush, and really, GGG just earned me as a customer. I don't want to say for a lifetime, right? There really is very few relationships that last for a lifetime, but I will say they earned my respect right then and there. To say, look, we are going to blow your expectations out of the water. You guys thought we were doing X, Y, or Z for the last 6 to 12 months. This is actually what we've been doing. And it was something way beyond all of your dreams and imaginations. So that being said, based on GGG's history, 4.0 is going to be way bigger than any of us can presently guess. And 3.8 is most likely going to include more than we presently expect, but will still leave us wanting more in 3.9. And 4.0, just like 3.5 did, just like 3.6 did, just like 3.7 with Legion League presently is. So, let's get into some of my wild predictions for 3.8. This is the moment where I'm going to share with you some of my wild predictions for 3.8, and then, of course, ask you all down below for your wild predictions for 3.8. My wild predictions are as follows. First, 3.8 will include one or multiple of the following archetypes. And I teased it earlier, summoners and necromancers. Rejoice, friends. Rejoice. This will be our league. And if it's not this, yes, you will hear me crying about it. 3.8 will include summoners and necromancer reworks. This could be something as simple as reworking minion AI, which I say simple because I'm the one just playing the game. I'm not the one coding it. It's probably a really, really actually complex and difficult thing to do. So it could be that part of it gets pushed off to 4.0. But I think summoner players rejoice with me. Those of you that have come over to play PoE, just like myself, specifically for summoners. That was how I got started in PoE, was because PoE had a much, much better summoner system than other action RPGs I was playing at the time, like Torchlight, like Diablo at the time. Summoners, I think this is our league. I think we might get some new summoner gems. I think we're definitely going to get some new summoner uniques, as well as maybe some summoner cards that we can farm. But summoners, I think this is it. And I think necromancer is the archetype that will be used. It hasn't been used. It hasn't been tweaked for quite some time. The occultist, the elementalist, both have been interacted with. I think summoners is one of the big archetypes that is out there in the game presently and still has a dedicated community of players that are playing summoners despite how buggy it is. I think 3.8 is going to be the redemption, the return. The moment where all of us summoners players can simply rejoice, go log into playing a witch, and start using zombies in Act 1 and feel great about it. I think that's what's coming down the pipeline in 3.8. And I'm hopeful that is indeed what is in the works for 3.8. Secondly, 3.8 will include spellcasting Inquisitor. So we've seen a little bit of players messing around with Volspark from back in the day, maybe making a little bit more coming back, but I think Inquisitor and some sort of spellcasting crit-based spellcaster would be an archetype that they're playing around with on the back end at GGG as they are using and preparing and testing for 3.8. I think Inquisitor is also an archetype that is coming down, probably a spellcaster. Thirdly, I think Tanky Jug is probably getting an archetype display, showing off Ye Old Faithful. Maybe that's simply a thick, tanky Juggernaut leap slamming around and killing stuff with melee. It could be a Juggernaut using something like Righteous Fire as a ground degen, as an AoE degen. If it ain't broke, please don't fix it. That's my only thing on this one. So please, please, please. Juggernaut is so consistent every single league right now. There is no need to break it. So here's what I'm hoping and predicting, that Tanky Jug just gets a couple new nodes added to it. I hope they don't break or mess any of the nodes that are presently on Tanky Jug, because there are lots of different gameplay styles that are available for Tanky Jug right now, and if it ain't broke, please, please don't fix it by accidentally breaking it. Fourthly, I think Rangers are going to get an archetype included in 3.8. Now, here's the problem with me giving you 4 following archetypes, right? Here's the problem with that. GGG, thus far, as they've been displaying characters and talking about reworks and talking with the use of archetypes, which we've got a whole video on that as well that you can go and check out if you want to know more about what those archetypes are and how GGG uses them in the development process. But the bottom line here is that they've only used 3 in the past. They've only typically been releasing 3 archetypes for as long as they've been talking about using archetypes with every new challenge league. So the problem with showing off 4 is that one of these isn't going to happen. It better not be summoners. Please, please, please include summoners in the 3.8 list. Like, just GGG. Please give us a summoners rework. Please make them more playable and give them better quality of life, because right now they are terrible. But anyway, YouTube, you guys all let me know what you guys think out of these 3. These are my wild predictions. I could be totally wrong on all of them, but I think these 4 archetypes are going to be the 4 archetypes. 3 out of the 4, maybe only 1 out of the 4 that will make it. If there's only 1 out of the 4 that make it, please let it be summoners. There we go. I've said my piece. I've made my case for summoners. That's my hope. Okay. The 3.8 timeline will look something like this. First off, it's going to get announced somewhere between August 13th and August 23rd. That's a typo there, that would be 4 days away. It's supposed to be 14 days away. So we just showed all of that work that says, hey, basically announcements happen between 14 to 24 days prior to a league. So that gives us a schedule of sometime between August 13th and August 23rd. Also, we know that it won't be announced on a Saturday, a Sunday, or a Monday. It could be announced any other day of the week, but according to GGG's track record, it probably won't be on a weekend, and it probably won't be on a Monday. Also, we will have a full website, a YouTube trailer, and a preview of League Uniques and Reworks. Those of you that are saying, well, duh, Iron, of course we're going to see that with 3.8. Well, actually, GGG has really revised and smoothed out, streamlined their announcement process for leagues over the last couple of years. It used to just be that it was a forum post, then accompanied with the forum post was also a YouTube trailer, and then on top of a YouTube trailer, occasionally they would post some details back into that forum post. But nowadays we're getting full-on websites, we're getting full-on graphics, we're getting displays of certain uniques that are getting dropped, certain divination cards that are getting dropped, along with YouTube trailers, along with even potentially multiple different announcement embargoes being lifted as soon as that announcement page goes live. And then we get to see all kinds of gameplay from all sorts of different gaming news outlets, which is great. So I think that's all safe to say that we're going to see that again with the 3.8 announcement. Thirdly, 3.8 will introduce a fresh way to rush level 100. So we saw pure breachstones and their rotas in 3.5 as really a way to just buy into a level 100 character. Right now in Legion League, of course, it's using 5-way domain fights in 3.7. I think 3.8 is going to introduce a fresh way to rush level 100, and I think it might be something that is high enough in level that it'll be good enough to use for rushing level 100, but low enough in level that it might be something that gets added into the racing scene, because we are seeing GGG really step up its game for all of these different qualifiers that are going to take place at ExileCon. So I think if they're going to introduce anything new that's going to take place at ExileCon, ExileCon is going to take place during this league while this league is present. So if there's anything that's going to change any of those awesome races that are going to take place at ExileCon, I think it's got to get introduced with 3.8, because this is going to be our last league before 3.8, before ExileCon actually happens. So if there's anything that is going to change the racing meta, it's going to happen in 3.8. It's got to happen before ExileCon. Next, fourthly, My fourth wild prediction is that 3.8 will bring new villains and new quality of life. This really isn't that big of a wild prediction in terms of quality of life. We've already got some announcement about some of the quality of life, but I do think that typically new NPCs or villains get added pretty much every single league. And I think that 3.8 will be a new villain. I don't think that there will be a new NPC with character storylines until 4.0. I just don't think that that's going to happen. I think Kavas was planned on with the 3.6 expansion and patch, and he had a bunch of voice lines and a bunch of story that got added in, and then synthesis didn't go core. And so from a development perspective, that's GGG having to go out of their way to get voice actors, to get voice lines, to code it all into the game, to include it, to say, hey, we've got this plan for how this guy's going to fit into the story. We've got to pay story writers to do that. We're going to put a bunch of work into an NPC that's going to go alongside and fit into the story of all of our other NPCs. And with League mechanics, you never know if they're going to go core. And so with synthesis, there was GGG thinking, hey, we've got this great idea that people are going to love, and Kavas is going to be a part of our game moving forward, and boom, it all blew up in their face. So I think a new NPC isn't going to get added until 4.0, but I do think a new villain, in a similar way to how we've got the timeless domain conflict, these are all old villains or old cultures that we're all familiar with because of the stories of PoE. But these are villains that are getting introduced in a new way that we're fighting, whether that's going back in time with incursions and with Alva and fighting the Vol, whether that's encountering the Eternal Empire, whether that's encountering the Karuyai. I think there's probably a villain out there that we haven't really tapped into, and I think there will be an individual villain or multiple individual villains that will be introduced as bosses for us to fight in 3.8. Quality of life that we're going to see coming down the pipeline in 3.8, I think, will be regarding Delve, as well as other past league issues, whether that is the Syndicate being account bound now, no longer character bound. I think those are some confirmed things that we've got confirmation from GGG that they are working on. We just don't have a timeline announced yet of when those are going to come out. I think those are going to come out in 3.8. Well, those are my wild predictions about 3.8, but what do you think about 3.8? I would love to hear and read, of course, all of your comments, all of your ideas, all of your wild speculations, all of your hopes and dreams for a 3.8. Give me the dreamiest dream you've got. My dreamiest dream is clearly that summoners would be made great again. Make summoners great again it's my dream for 3.8. If I could just have one thing happen in 3.8, it would be that the summoner playstyle would come back again, because then I could just play summoners from 3.8, 3.9, all the way into 4.0, all over again, and relive my first 2.5 years of Path of Exile with updates and with quality of life additions. I think that would be great. So those are my hopes, my dreams. What about for you? What wild predictions do you have for the reworks that will happen in Path of Exile 3.8, whether that's reworks for Ascendencies, whether that's reworks for skills, whether that's reworks for gameplay mechanics? What are the reworks that you think will happen? Then what wild predictions do you have for league mechanics for 3.8? Do you think it's going to be a Loot Pinata league similar to what we've had with, whether that's Abyss or Breach or Harbinger, or even right now presently with Legion? Or do you think they're going to tone that down a little bit? Do you think there will be a bit more of a gamey or board gamey style system that will come into play in 3.8? I don't think there's any way that that'll happen. I think they've got all of their, resources that are tied up into 4.0 basically right now, creatively doing those sorts of extended gamified game mechanics. But that doesn't mean that I couldn't be wrong. I could totally be wrong, and maybe there's something that's a little bit more complex coming in 3.8. Let me know down below in the comments what you think. And lastly, what Ascendancy do you want to see take over as the dominant playstyle in 3.8? So we saw Winter Ward and Trickster go big time during Synthesis. Right now, during Legion League, of course, we're seeing a whole bunch of various Cycloners going big, whether that's Berserkers, whether that's even Scion is seeing some play, but lots of different players are playing with pretty much Cyclone and trying to see exactly how that'll work out. And then, of course, you've also got Magic Finders playing occasionally some Deadeyes and occasionally some Pathfinders. But what Ascendancy do you want to see take over as the dominant playstyle in 3.8? I'm actually a little torn on this one. Of course, I want to see Summoners come back, but the problem is if they come back as the dominant playstyle, then that means economically they'll cost a lot. So maybe if Summoners come back, maybe I'll play SSF. I don't know. We'll see. What Ascendancy do you want to see take over as the dominant playstyle in Path of Exile 3.8? Thanks so much for watching. I look forward to interacting with all of your various discussion questions, topics, and feedback down below. Of course, a big shout out to all of our various supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to join us on our Discord channel for any of the hype that will be coming up for 3.8, any of the announcements, we try to do our best to stay abreast of those announcements as soon as they get made. And so we will do our best to pass that information along to you. So you can join our Discord with a free Discord link that's down below. It's free to everybody to join, and then there's perks for our Patreon users. So thanks once again to all of our Patreon supporters for all of their support. And I hope today is the day a Mirror of Calandra drops for you.
Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.